Hello, lovely people, and welcome, as always, to Conscious Conversion, a weekly podcast about how we're bridging the gap between business and spirit, money and meaning, technology and regeneration in a wildly changing world. In a time of so much polarity and uncertainty, this podcast explores how together we are connecting across the planet, across our differences, and across dimensions as we build the new earth together. I am your faithful and loving host, Sarah Yemtich, and today I am delighted and I'm really interested and curious to see what's going to unfold as I introduce you to Josh Tapp of The Lucky Titan. I met Josh Tapp a few months ago. We met through a mutual friend, and I was on his podcast, The Lucky Titan. And we had a great conversation. And what's interesting is that we discovered some of our own differences and similarities within those differences. So we'll get to that. But this is going to be a relatively atypical discussion from what we normally do, and I think you're going to enjoy it. I'm going to enjoy it a lot, and I know Josh will too, or at least I hope so. I'm going to do my best.
Oh, I will love this.
So go ahead, I guess, maybe, and just introduce yourself for a moment so I don't have to read that bio.
Yeah, you bet. I appreciate that. I actually asked Sarah, just so everybody knows, first off, you have an awesome host here. I'm really excited to be on this show. But I'm the kind of guy, I don't really love bios because it's a lot of self-promotion, if that makes sense. And sticking with your topic, I think it has to do with relatability. You know, you talk about amplifying people, and I do think that nobody is above one another in what they do. And if I were just to explain myself, my mission is to find the 1,000 of the world's best humans and help elevate them. And that's what our entire company is built around. And we do that through podcasting currently, but every company I buy or that we try to do, or anything that I do in my personal life, is always around how do we find those people? You know, I just yesterday, I was sitting there at church, actually, which I'm sure we will dive into, but there was this guy who was there in our congregation. He has the voice of God. I swear he sounds like Liam Neeson or Morgan Freeman, right? He's got a deep rumbling voice. But he was just telling these stories. I'm like, man, he's like 90 years old. I'm like, you need a podcast. And I don't care if you think you're going to die in the next year, but this guy had some amazing stories. So we're just looking for people like that, or who are just great humans who have a lot to give back, like Sarah. But that's me in a nutshell and what we're trying to do.
Thank you so much. And that's where we have this beautiful sort of overlap, is that we both have this intention to amplify the work of people who are doing transformative, work in the world, who are doing things for good. We come at it in this podcast, as you know, my primary, audience is spiritual entrepreneurs. And typically we're not going down the path of traditional religion or traditional Christianity specifically.
Right.
It's broader than that. It's a different flavor for sure. And when you and I spoke, and we had so much in common in terms of our mission in the world and all this, and yet we had that sort of difference, I thought this would be a really fun conversation, because honestly, I read my own intro, and it's about connecting across differences. It's about connecting across dimensions. It's about sort of coming into unity from that place of polarization that we're in the world. And I feel like this kind of conversation helps get us there. And so I'm really excited to hear your perspective.
Well, I'm excited to hear yours too, because I think people look at it, like you said, too linearly. Like you talk about multiple dimensions. I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on that too. But it's so interesting to me that people become so polarized, like you mentioned in your intro, where they're anti one thing or another. And I'm the kind of guy, I believe that it's all good, right? If you're doing good in the world, that's what matters, right? Is that people are lifting and elevating one another. That's what we're all about over here.
I suppose that one could kind of get in there and create some sort of discussion around what is good. Right. So if is your version of what's doing good in the world different from my version of what's doing good in the world?
See, and I'd love to hear what yours is, because that actually makes it unique for me. Or I can be the one to lead out if you want. It's up to you.
Yeah, I mean, so one of my first questions that helps us like sort of go in deep, which I feel like you've already started to answer, but I just want to give you an opportunity to take it even deeper, and maybe it'll take us in that direction of what is good. But
Right.
right now on the planet, in this incarnation, if you even believe in having multiple incarnations, who knows? But in this Josh Tapp incarnation on this planet right now, what would you say is your soul's purpose?
Yeah, I know for me, and that is such a great question. And like you said, I did kind of already touch on it, but I have this belief that everybody kind of has something inside them where they're like, there's somebody that they're supposed to be, and whether and so this is where we can kind of get into the reincarnation or whatnot, right? Is like some people believe that it's reincarnation. Some people believe that, you know, it's echoes. I kind of believe it's like echoes of past lives or of past, like what I believe is like my spirit. I believe that in my past life, I was a leader, I was a warrior, I was somebody who was pushing the bill, you know, and helping advance society or whatnot. And I feel like in this life where we live in the, you know, 21st century at this point, you know, where we're all technologically inclined and we have all these different technologies that are helping move us forward. But I do feel like we feel those echoes of the past life being like that you're meant for something more than sitting here and, you know, my generation, it's like playing video games and being a Twitch streamer or whatever. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but are you moving something forward that's bigger, you know, and helping other people reach their potential? And I found for myself, even honestly in the past 3 months, Sarah, I've been meeting a lot of these really big business leaders who I've been admiring my whole life. And when I meet with them, they always tell me, like, your number one skill, Josh, is you help people to expand their vision and see things bigger. And for me, I love helping encourage people's dreams, no matter what it is. Even if I disagree with it in a lot of cases, it's like, well, if you're passionate about it, go for it. You know, don't sit here trying to hide your talents from the world. Like, actually go out there and amplify what you have and be who you are, but help other people do the same thing. And sometimes that doesn't always require being polar and political and, you know, whatever, right? It's more about being a good human and helping the human race. Does it make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, so what I'm hearing there is it's like helping people live to their fullest self-expression, their most powerful self-expression.
That is a great way to say it. You know, what's funny is I look at our world today, and there's kind of like Christians versus spirituality, or, you know, Republicans versus Democrats, or you know, vaccinators versus non-vaccinators. You know, there's all these crazy polar things, when the truth is we all want the same things. We want the world to be a better place. We want it to be happy. And I'm not saying everybody, because there are obviously, you know, religious repressors, or, you know, anti-religious repressors, or you have like horrible left side, horrible right side people. Like, there are people on either side who are not great people, or not acting as great people right now, but they have the potential to be better. And the way that I look at it, just being somebody who is Christian, is that I believe that spirituality is a universal concept, and we all have different names for it. We have different affinities for directions that we like to go. But I feel like there's just base principles that they're truth. It's unchanging truth, where like gravity, you can't say, hey, gravity is non-existent. I mean, you can try to defy it, but you're going to regret it later, you know? And I think there are universal principles that do apply. And I think being a good human is one of those, you know, however you want to word it.
So interesting. So I think that we make certain assumptions too. Like when I think of a typical mainstream Christian, because I was raised that way, Southern Baptist, Southern Missouri, I typically met people who don't believe in the breadth and depth of spirituality and the potential goodness of that breadth and depth, and certainly not necessarily a belief in echoes or of past lives. So you're bringing, I think, a nice flavor to the spirituality of Christianity that I appreciate.
Well, and I appreciate you saying that. I had a spiritual leader back when I was, I think, 17 or 18. And he challenged me a lot to be like, don't get into this, our religion is the only place where truth exists. And putting blinders on you, saying, you can't go to a Lutheran church. You can't go hang out with somebody who maybe is agnostic or atheist. You can't, like, it's good to hear other people's opinions and start to say, how does that fit? What truths do I accept and which things do I reject, without making them feel like they're a horrible person for believing something, right? Because there are some things within spirituality that I just blatantly don't agree with, but I'm not going to sit here being like, Sarah, why do you do these things? You're a horrible person. You should be baptized, right? That's not, in my opinion, being a good person or living those same principles. It's saying, what do I believe? And I don't think that needs to fit within a spiritual confines. I just think it's finding, if you are a religious person, finding a religion that fits all of your beliefs, not just, there's a few that I pick and choose that I like or don't like. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So in that sense, you do think that people should find a sort of their own dogma that works for them, their own religion, we'll say, that works for them.
Yes, I do 100% believe that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think we're lagged a little bit.
No worries. So this podcast, as you know, is about the new earth, the new paradigm, and how we visualize that as we can all kind of agree probably that the old systems are crumbling, right? Like the old
I would agree with that.
Financial systems seem to not be working out so well. Our old, sort of medical systems are crumbling. A lot of what we knew to be true and what we assumed were going to last sort of in perpetuity are not working anymore on our planet. And so this podcast is dedicated to visualizing what we want, as opposed to just kind of being a victim of everything that's happening, so-called happening to us. How can we visualize the world that we want and lean into that and feel it and talk about it and make it as real as possible now? And so as we're talking about spirituality and religion, and I'm curious, how do you visualize the new paradigm of that topic of spirituality, of religion, of Christianity specifically, if you want to go there?
Yeah, I think there's been kind of a unique thing happening where people are losing identity by trying to find identity. And I think, I do think at some point you have to say, okay, this is what I believe, right? And that belief doesn't have to be concrete. Like, it's meant to change. It's meant to flow. I think what happens though is that too many people have had poor experiences from one side or the other, right? I have actually had some very poor experiences with people from the spirituality side, having been a missionary for my church. I mean, we were just harassed constantly by these people, but I don't have negative feeling towards them anymore, and because I realized, oh, we're on the same side. But then somebody like you, Sarah, you might have had some horrible experiences in your church, or as you left your church, some people are just so cruel because they want you to fit their beliefs. And it happens over and over and over again, where people feel like they have to project their beliefs on other people, when the truth is, if they would just close their mouth and listen to somebody else, they might actually find that they're not too far off, right? Everybody's this is why I love, so I know a lot of people over in the Asian countries, right? So India, Japan, China, right? And I love talking with them about their religions and their belief systems, especially the ones who have actually kind of departed from the traditional paths, but they still believe in the multi-generational like having their shrines and actually, and then like basically worshiping their ancestors, and which is something that we actually don't do in my personal religion, but I love to see it. And that's where I start to believe in the echoes, right? The things that translate from the past into the present. And I see that the past doesn't have to necessarily be abolished, right? We get polar again. I'm just going to keep using that word over and over again, but I feel like we get too polar sometimes of saying, well, then crush the churches, crush the governments, crush whatnot. When the truth is that there are some fundamentals that they're still truth, right? The problem is that when you add humans into truth, it gets muddled, right? And then people start to pick and choose what they believe. And then people start going down some pretty crazy paths sometimes um, simply because they're wanting to be anti. Does that make sense?
Yes. And one thing that sort of fluttered to the surface for me as you were saying that was humans sort of getting in the way of truth. And is it so much
Yep.
humans as much as it is egos?
Yeah.
However we want to define
I
that.
love that. Yeah. And I
Because
would agree with that entirely.
Go ahead. No, I want to hear from you.
Ahead.
Go. No, you.
My take on ego, and it's so funny because I've been learning a lot about this, because especially people in the spirituality realm, like ego is huge in spirituality. I've found, I didn't realize that. So it's been so unique for me to see that, because I do think that, and I'm probably going to butcher your understanding of ego. That's why I'd love to hear your side, because it's so cool to see that the ego is what drives everything, right? To me, the ego is the spirit. It's like what you believe is truth, and like those moments where you're just bouncing off your chair, you have to share because it's something you believe so wholeheartedly. I get that way a lot about business, and about different aspects of business, where somebody else might get that exact same way about their health or about something entirely different. And I feel like what happens though is that in an attempt to be different, people are not aligning with their own beliefs. Like they're like, well, just because, I'm just going to throw it out there because he's the current president, right? Just because Biden said this, I'm going to do the exact opposite because I don't like Biden, right? Or I'm trying to think of another person, like the Dalai Lama or something. Like because I don't like the way he teaches, I'm going to go completely the opposite direction, which for some people might actually align with their belief system. But some people, it's simply like they deviate from their own beliefs and try to adopt beliefs that maybe they don't actually truly believe in, because they want to be the anti, or it gives them more fulfillment to be different. And I think you're going to see a huge shift to that. We're already seeing, 2020 was one of those moments. The pandemic was almost like this thing in the background when, I just said the big bad P word. You can't say that on YouTube, so sorry. COVID, not the pandemic. But COVID was almost like this mask for what was actually happening behind the scenes, where there's been this like mass exodus towards trying to figure out who we are. And I think it was because people had too much time on their hands, and they're like, oh my goodness, who am I? What? And like people are going off on these like spirit walks or whatnot, trying to find themselves. And I think sometimes in an attempt to find themselves, they lose themselves. Does that make sense?
I think so. So by questioning everything that is like the dominant narrative, maybe they end up rejecting pieces of the truth. Pieces of truth
that they actually believe in. I guess to put it this way is that I think everybody has kind of a core moral system, right, within them, where they're like, these are my standards that I seek to, like, I'm not going to kill somebody, right? I'm not going to, I don't know, like rape somebody or something, right? Like, I'm not going to do something that's horrible, because those are like my core beliefs, right? I need to eat. I need to have sexual desire fulfilled. I need to have a roof over my head, right? We have these like core desires and needs, and we have beliefs tied around those. But I think sometimes that people will deviate from those core beliefs because they're chasing something that they think is what they want. And eventually I think you find yourself, I think everybody at some point within their life is like, you know what I'm doing or what I'm believing doesn't actually align with my core belief. So maybe I need to realign myself. And I think that's the beauty of life, is that it's there's not a straight path for anyone, it's meant to be a long-term jaunt towards wherever you're trying to go. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And it's my hope and so-called belief that we inevitably will get there.
Yeah.
No matter how much we deviate.
Okay.
Yeah. No matter how much we deviate, no matter how circuitous our journey, no matter how much we fall off the path that we originally intended, or that, whatever, we will eventually come back to ourselves and come back to our own ultimate truth. I believe that, or at least that's how I get out of bed when I'm having a tough time.
I agree with you entirely. I think people beat themselves up too much. It's like there's a direction for everyone. And I feel like I'd love to hear your take on it. I know this is your show and you like to interview people, but I'd love to hear your take on the ego, because I want to learn from that side as well.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's necessarily my take. It's just what I have gleaned from listening and reading and some intuition. But how I see the ego is okay. So my spirit or soul, they're not totally interchangeable, but they're somewhat interchangeable, is part of a universal spirit or soul, which is part of God. So awesome. My ego is my individuation of that. So if you were looking at, cool. If we're talking about the ocean of God or source or spirit, my ego is what gives me sort of if I'm a drop, if my soul is a drop of that ocean, my ego is what helps me know that I'm a drop. My ego is what helps individuate me from the whole. So it's necessary. It's an important thing. Otherwise I wouldn't know that I'm Sarah, and I wouldn't know that my mom is Mary, and I wouldn't know that, that I live in Costa Rica right now and that this is my mission in life. Like, that's all coming from my ego, which is my individuation from source, or from the ocean of spirit. Yet, if I get too attached to any of those identifications, if I get too attached to my perspective, I'm only one drop in the whole ocean. And if I start to think that my perspective of that drop in the ocean is the truth for all, then that is an over-attachment to my own ego, to my own individuation. But if I can see that I'm in context, that my ego exists in a context of a much, much, much bigger picture, and that you, Josh, are the same as I am. You too are a drop in the ocean. You have a different perspective. You have a different individuation. Your ego identifies differently, but ultimately we are the same. And so it's our ego that helps us know our individuation, but you have to have a healthy relationship to it in order to realize that individuation is part of a greater context of which we are all a part.
That is really cool. I love that. You need to send me the recording, so I want to re-listen to it. I'm trying to jot notes in here. That's cool.
So when I was thinking, when you said humans get in the way of truth, which I agree with, I mean, I think that's a big problem with a lot of sacred texts, is that humans are way too involved in those for me to hang my hat 100%. On them. Exactly. But it's not just humans getting in the way, because I still hold I don't like to use the word belief too much, but I still hold a knowing in my heart that humans are divine, that humans don't necessarily have to be getting in the way of the truth, that we are the truth. We can be the truth, Jesus arguably was human, and he is divine. He's and I think arguably we all have that potential within us. What's getting in the way of our ultimate truth is perhaps that our over-identification with ego. And so whenever, an over-identification with ego gets involved in the writing of sacred texts, we've got a big problem, because that's just one perspective in a vast ocean. And it's one perspective that might be very motivated in personal gain. Yeah.
And I can definitely see that truth as well. It's so interesting. Yeah. You've got me thinking, for sure. This is why I love these conversations, because it's fun to see this, and like to see the different ways. Cause like for me, belief is like the word that I use, but for you, like, I don't think it's belief, right? I'm curious. I know you're supposed to be interviewing me, but I am curious with belief.
This isn't an interview; it's a discussion. We're like having a glass of wine or beer or something on a deck, talking about life.
Oh, good. Exactly. I always want people to do this to me too. I'm like, I'd love to share my opinion, but I don't want to hop in and be like, "Here's my opinion." I want to shove it down your throat, right? I am curious what belief means to you. Like, where does belief fall in there? Because like you said, you're like, I don't want to use the word belief. I'm curious why. Like what sparks that?
I don't have like a super well articulated response to that, but I can say that there's
That's
something
okay.
about the word belief that boxes me in.
Okay.
And and to me, it's that over identification with something where I don't want to
Yeah.
box myself in, because I am so open to other potential perspectives and truths, knowing that there still is
Yeah.
one vast ocean, but that there are infinite perspectives of that ocean. And so if
Yeah.
I cling too tightly to a belief, then I'm afraid that I will close myself off to all the infinite possibilities.
And
And
like miss
that
out on
said,
those other
sometimes
opportunities.
what's that? Yeah, but I mean, and that said, sometimes you need to sort of, latch on to something in order to survive. That's where the healthy identification comes in.
Right.
But there's some things that I feel as if I know to be true from experience,
Yeah.
not because somebody told me, but I feel it. I feel it deeply, like in my cells, in my heart. And then there are some things that are left wide open to interpretation and to crystallization.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, I love that. It's funny because the verbiage of everybody like seems the same, no matter who you talk to. So I love to see the different perspectives on it, because one of the arguments that people will make, even in Christian faith, about spirituality is like, well, then what do you believe in? They don't believe in anything. And I'm like, I don't think that's true. I really don't think that's true. I think it's like you said, it's a flowing, moving, like I'm going to go total nerd here, but if you're a fan of Avatar: The Last Airbender, it's like one of my favorite TV shows. But they talk like the waterbenders.
It's my child's favorite thing.
Oh, love it. Well, I'm going to make myself seem like your child here, but my wife and I love it. But it's I do think that spirituality in a whole, no matter whether it's religious or free flowing, it needs to be that way. Like you have to flow with it. And I think the best exemplification I could give of this is I had a friend of mine who he's actually of a completely different faith, and he told me, we just had our first child about 5 months ago at the time of this recording, and he's like, I want you to just, as you're holding him the first time, just feel. Don't think, just feel. And that's really hard for me because I'm a very logical person. And I think, I mean, you're talking, I'm taking notes. I was laughing at myself. I'm so not the typical person who comes on your show, probably, because I'm sitting here going, ooh, I can learn from this. And like, I'm trying to jot it down so I can look at it later. But it probably doesn't feel as free flowing because I'm more linear. But just like holding my son the first time, like you said, I could completely believe in what you're saying of being one universal consciousness, because you feel completely connected to that child. And or the first time that you like kiss your partner, if you have a partner, or holding their hand or something, right? The first time you make some sort of physical connection with them, like there's a huge but I feel like it kind of opens that, I think you guys call it ethos, but it just like opens that up to where you're accepting that you're connected in a whole other way. And my personal beliefs is that before this life, there was another life where we all live together in a spirit form. And I do believe that those are the echoes that we're feeling as we live this life. And like when you meet somebody, you just hit it off, and whether have the same beliefs or whatever, right? It's, if you just hit it off with someone, say, I believe that you were close to them spiritually in the life before this and in the life that comes next. Like I do feel like those are the quote unquote echoes that kind of go through the different reincarnations or whatever you want to call it.
I love that. I mean, I think we typically call those like soul family. When you meet somebody that's like, we are soul family, like on the tree of life, we have been on the same branch for a long time.
Yeah. It's those people that you meet and you're like, wow, we're best friends already.
Totally. No, I have that experience a lot, especially down here in Costa Rica. It's like my particular branch on the soul family lineage converged here.
Yeah, ended up in Costa Rica. I love that. I felt the same way about Mexico, to be honest.
Oh, wow.
I had so many preconceptions of what Mexico would be like. It's gorgeous. Like if you've seen Nacho Libre, that show like butchers what Mexico is like. And you watch a lot of these shows and you're like, Mexico is incredible. It's green, it's lush, it's beautiful. The people are amazing and they're so kind. They're so kind. And welcoming and willing to bring you. And like, once you're in their family, they will kill for you to make sure that you're taken care of and safe. And it's pretty cool.
Beautiful. Yeah. I mean, I think this world is a beautiful place. So instead, rather, here's another little, I guess, belief. I'll use that word.
She's like, I hate it so much, I'm going to say it.
Or something that I feel like I know is that, that heaven and hell are not distinct places outside of this planet or outside of ourselves, but it's something that we create within ourselves and collectively on this planet, on Earth. And we can choose, we can choose. And I feel like a lot of what's in sacred texts is metaphor. We can choose to create our own inner hell or own collective hell, or our own inner heaven or our own collective heaven. And when we look at a place like Mexico or Costa Rica or other parts of the world, if we could collectively see the beauty of groups of people or of places or of, certain scenarios, if we can find the beauty in it and glean the beauty in it, that goes a long way into creating heaven on earth.
I agree entirely. It's so funny. That's actually the religion that I'm tied to is that's our belief, right? Is that it's actually a state. It's not like you're going to go down under the earth to the fiery burning. It's like, if you're a horrible person, you're going to be horrible in the next life. Like, you're just going to keep bringing that with you because it echoes, right? And you can make, like you said, a heaven on earth or a hell on earth, depending on what you really want out of life, right? So I love it. I love hearing these things from you as well. It's really fun for me.
It's really nice to find our similarities, because it seems like there's a lot. I want to pivot a bit, and we can do it. Maybe we can do it in a nice segue, if I can be so skilled. I want to pivot to talking about business some, and how and sort of new paradigm of business, because I know that's a topic that you're extremely passionate about, is business. And how do you integrate your spirituality, your religion, your soul's purpose into your business?
Yeah, I love this question because I don't feel like business and spirituality are mutually exclusive. I feel like they're incorporated. It's a lifestyle. And I have this, and I'm just going to tell a story with this. 2 stories. So the first one was my wife, right when she got pregnant with our son, she started getting this horrible pain in her side. And she's like, is this pregnancy? And then my wife, being a mild hypochondriac, she went and Googled it. And I mean, we're getting answers from, you have cancer, the baby died, to, oh, you just worked out too hard, to so on and so forth. It ended up not even really being a big issue, but we went to the doctor and it was resolved, right? He's like, this is what it is. They took oh my gosh, ultrasound. They ultrasound and they did everything, and just, it was nothing serious. And I look at that and say, okay, if we had just been in front of the right person who we trusted, we have a great family doctor that we go to, who's a good friend. My wife worked for him years ago, and we knew we could trust his opinion because A, he was knowledgeable, but B, because we resonate with him, right? We believe in his principles, or we believe in what he teaches. And we knew that whatever came out of his mouth was going to be the most accurate answer we could get out of a doctor, right? Then let's pivot this and say, okay, I'd started my first business when I was in college, like 10 years ago. And I was just gleaning information from the university. I was gleaning information from online sources and finding all these different opinions, right? These, what you would say, those boxes, where people were trying to limit business to be, this is how it works. There's no way to deviate from it. You have to do it my way or the highway. And I don't believe that that's truth. I do not believe that's truth when it comes to business. I think business, much like spirituality, is a flowing, changing thing where it's all about finding the people, what you would say, right? Your branch on the family tree. It's finding that branch and then creating a space for them to be able to grow and work together. For me, that actually falls within business. Our company is built. So we produce podcasts for people. It's one of the companies I own. But it's kind of my baby, because this is where I bring my family tree together and bring those people who are, I know that we just resonate from the start. Right. And I make every decision in my business with that in mind. I had a guy that we hired about 4 months ago for a sales role, which is one of the hardest, as Sarah probably knows, one of the hardest roles to outsource. And it's not because people lack the skill usually. It's because they don't align with you. They don't resonate with you on the same level. And for me, I had 5 different people I interviewed. 4 were highly qualified. 1 was not. The one who was not, he hopped onto the call and he's like, Josh, I just want to tell you, here's where I come from. And he started to talk through his life story of overcoming seriously some of the hardest things you can overcome as a person. And just telling me, like, I'm not perfect. He's like, I am not a trained salesperson, but I will do everything in my power to be the number one guy that you can have. And I just knew I could trust this guy. And he's become one of my best friends. He is our top sales guy. He does a fantastic job because we resonate. And I can trust that anytime he's talking to somebody, he's going to be feeling for that. He's not just going to be like, oh, well, you make X amount of dollars, you do, all these boring business things, right? He's saying we resonate. And then bringing that resonation, that person into our pool, like you would say, like that spiritual consciousness of us trying to lift each other together. And so we've built our company with that in mind, of saying, how do we find the 1,000 best people? And I'm going to start using this term, the 1,000 people who are the branch on our tree of life, right? We know they're out there and they're just such amazing humans. And whether they're a billionaire or a homeless man who's like, hey, I have something in my heart I want to share, like, those are the people that we want to provide for. And so we look at it from that perspective. And that's how we try to do business, where it's not a wear your suits, right? You'll never see me in a suit. I went to a black tie event in a t-shirt. People were blown away by it. And I probably lost a lot of friends, but I made 2 friends out of that I was like, you're my people. You're my people. So that's, anyways, that's how I believe business should be done.
I love it. And I totally agree. My business name before it was Conscious Conversion was Resonate with Sarah.
I love it.
So you're talking about, like, do we resonate was like the underlying ethic of my business is like, do we resonate? Like, can we create harmony together in this world?
Right.
And I also love that your response included that, spirituality or religion in your case is a lifestyle. And I think recently somebody asked me a question about, like, what percentage of your life is devoted to your spirituality. And I was like, I don't even understand the question. Like, this pencil is part of my spirituality. Like every single, like everything, like being stuck in traffic is part of my spiritual practice. Like everything is tied to that. And business is no different. My business is 100% an expression of my spirit and of my spirituality. This podcast is an expression of my spirit and my spirituality, a little more, even more explicitly. I'm probably a more explicit version of that than a lot of other people, because working with spiritual entrepreneurs and thought leaders typically. But I love that response. I love that it's all integrated, and it is my hope and prayer that in this new paradigm that we're creating actively right now, that's true for more and more people. More and more businesses.
Yeah. And I just, my big thing is I want to work with people who aren't going to try and shove opinions down people's throats, because going back to my time, preaching for my church, was that there were missionaries who were out there like shoving things down people's throats. And I'm just sitting here going, what? Like, that's not what we're here to do. And like, we believe in Christ. And I'm like, Christ didn't do that. The Dalai Lama didn't do that. Right. They're like, here's what I believe. What do you think? Right. Let's share opinions. Let's talk about this and break bread together, and like we're doing here on the podcast of, well, what do you know? What do you believe? Like that's to me is it. I think business needs to be run exactly the same way. I think your life should be run that same way. And I love that you say that. Like, what amount of your time do you spend on spirituality? Right? Well, I mean, it's every day for me. It's all day for me. You know, if I'm in traffic, how I compose myself and how I act is training me in my own spirituality, you know, in those stressful moments.
And when I stray from the path, I reflect on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a cousin. She's like, if you ever want to know if you want to marry somebody, take them on a road trip. Because you get to see the best and worst of people on a road trip. You get their crazy side where they're singing at the top of their lungs. You get their side where they're just ticked off because they're in traffic or been in the car too long. And anyways, it's awesome. I'll end it there.
I want to know more, and I want my listeners to know more about like what specifically you do in your business. Like, what are your offerings and how can people find you?
Yeah, so our core offering that we provide for people is helping them to expand their message through podcasting. I believe wholeheartedly that podcasting, and we're kind of putting that in a bucket because I believe that content and communicating with other humans is the fastest way to reconnect with that family branch, right? It's the best way to bring people, attract them to your message and share what you know with other people who already know those things. So our methodology of what we do is we say, okay, let's eliminate all of the mathematical science stuff that comes with starting a business and having a brand, which is, you know, and starting a podcast in particular. There's so many different nuances of, well, how do I get an audience? How do I make money? How do I do X, Y, Z? And our business is actually built to say, you know what? Show up, record, we will take it from there. And what we do is we repurpose the content, we promote it for you. We actually try to get you sponsors, other people onto your business so that you can just focus on the people, right? I built this company with that entire goal in mind. And every time we launch a new product or buy a different business or whatnot, it's always to help move that goal forward. Of saying the best humans out there do not need to be sitting here trying to figure out how to put their podcast on iTunes. That's just ridiculous, right? They should be communicating with other humans because there are people out there who I feel like are blessed with a gift to rally other people to their cause. And so we're looking for those people to say, hey, I'm bringing my branch together, right? Because the truth is, I mean, Sarah is probably, it's obvious at this point from our interview that I am not going to be the guy to be able to bring together a group of people around spirituality and business. It's not my forte. And that probably isn't my branch, but that does not mean that my branch and your branch can't work together, right? And that's what we look for is saying, how do we find people like Sarah who bring her branch together and help them to grow and to scale and to be better humans? And that's ultimately the end goal for us.
It's beautiful. And I'm grateful that our branches are near one another.
I agree. I agree. I hope people are starting to find too that we're not as far away from each other as we think.
No. I agree. I mean, I think that's why I was so excited to have you on the show, is because it was so clear to me that, you know, when you're talking about church and Christianity and all these things, it's like, wow, we have a really big, obvious sort of difference in how we approach things on the surface, but yet it felt like we, underneath all of that, we're very, very similar in how we approach business and life. And so this discussion really, I feel like, confirmed and uncovered that even more. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me on, Sarah. It's been an awesome conversation.
Yeah. How can people find you? I know you're on Instagram at The Lucky Titan.
Yeah.
Lucky Titan.
Yeah.
And any other beautiful ways to find you?
The best way to connect with us is to go to podcastmultipliers.com. I'm actually a very accessible person. People keep telling me I should not be, but I just like communicating with people. So you can reach out to us there. That's almost always where you'll find me or somebody on our team. And we're there for people if they need help.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And thank you all for listening. I hope you got as much out of this conversation as I did, and have a gorgeous rest of your day.